Okay, I'm okay. So I can begin. Yeah, I can begin.
Yep,
Okay,
you're
let me
on.
just share my screen. Yeah. Share screen.
Make sure you share the application.
Yeah, sure. Can you see it now?
It is
Yeah.
coming.
I
There we go.
remember.
Looks good.
Yeah. So okay, okay. So I just begin. Yeah.
Yep, you can begin. It's not on the presentation mode yet,
Yeah. Okay.
but that's
Yeah.
okay.
I can
Yep,
begin the
that looks good.
slideshow. Okay, so first
Yep.
of all, yeah, so as I begin, first of all, I would just like to thank everyone at Ronan for supporting me as always, for supporting my work, and also for inviting me to present in this lightning talk format. I also like to thank my mentors, but especially Professor Nigel Vincent, who supervised my MA at the University of Manchester in 2010. He introduced me to this particular topic, so I owe him everything on that. Okay, so my topic is el deísmo in Spanish and dialects. Yeah. Right, first of all, so this is a type of a Romance a prepositional infinitive. Yes, I'm so glad that Paola is here because she's a native Italian speaker, and also Stephanie is also here because she's a native French speaker. But however, I'm going to focus on Spanish, which is probably more familiar to to the people in the US. But still, I've got two native speakers of Italian and French, so that's nice. Yes, so prepositional infinitives are, well, by definition, preposition plus, infinitive. And, they are extremely common in Romance languages. There's a particular phenomenon that I would like to look at today, is because it's, verb plus preposition plus infinitive, i.e., the prepositional infinitive is a direct argument of the verb, the object. Okay, so the verb selects an object, which happens to be, a PI, as noted here. One thing about this particular construction is that prepositional infinitives are generally rare in Ibero languages. Yes, I mean this doesn't just happen in Spanish, but also in Portuguese and Catalan. Certainly, in comparison to Italian and French. If I just choose one example, one out of many examples, decidir, which means to decide in Spanish. In Spanish, we often just have the bare infinitive. So, se decide redactar un comunicado, okay, we just have se decide redactar, etc. But compared to Italian and French, whereas Italian, however, people often say decise di studiare il fiume, for example. In French, je déciderai de partir. Okay, so in both Italian and French, we've got this, de here, which we do not have in the Ibero Romance languages. There's a very common, a very simple, but also a very popular explanation. That's a valency. When we have a simple verb which selects an object, and there's no need for a preposition. Yeah, you will simply have, the bare infinitive. Contrast this to reflexive verbs. When the verb has a reflexive pronoun, we then need a preposition. Okay, so according to general patterns of valency, prepositional infinitives are adjuncts, so they're selected only by reflexive verbs, but not by simple verbs. Okay, so that's a very brief picture of this particular phenomenon in the different Romance languages. All right, okay. I've mentioned that prepositional infinitives are generally rare in Spanish. But however, which makes that the attestations of their present infinitive in Spanish dialects extremely interesting, because they are not standard. We don't get them in standard Spanish. So it's been noted that in Andalusia and in La Mancha in Spain, we get these examples. So for example, esperar, which means to hope. It's been attested that people do say espero de verte pronto, espero de verte. Okay, whereas in standard Spanish, you simply espero verte. Compare this to Italian, sperare di, so yo spero di, etc. Desear, it's also been attested that estoy deseando de llegar a casa. Okay, so contrast this to standard Spanish, where estoy deseando llegar. Okay, so without the de, but however we have de in the dialects here. Compare this to Italian, desiderare di, plus infinitive. So again, permitir, which means to permit. No permito a mis hijos de llegar tarde. In standard Spanish, you simply get no permito a mis hijos llegar tarde. Also, again, you compare this to Italian and French. Italian, you get your permettere di. In French, you go permettre de, etc. All right, so we've got this distribution, especially el deísmo in Spanish on dialects that I would like to look at with you today. Another thing is as de infinitive, they often alternate with the bear infinitives and forming these kinds of patterns. So, for example, with decir, which means to say, you can say, Andrea me dijo de, or without de, in ir al cine. Without de, so it's the bear infinitive that's being chosen. It means Andrea told me that he would go to the cinema. It's a simple statement. Whereas if we use de, Andrea me dijo de ir, that means Andrea told me to go to the cinema. It becomes a command. Pedir, likewise, so me hijo me pidió de, or without de, ir a jugar. Without de, so simply me hijo me pidió ir. That would mean that my son asked me if he could go and play. Whereas with de, it becomes my son asked me to go and play with him. It's a request. Okay, so again, without de, it's a statement. Whereas with de, it's a command. So I guess we can form this sort of minimal pair here. With and without de has this command and statement contrast, which is quite interesting actually. And also, what is it? Yeah. A bit more needs to be said about these type of commands. So these type of commands is these are object controlling verbs, whereas your statements are subject controlling. What I mean by this is that all right, the object of the verb controls. It binds the subject of the infinitive. This is a standard constructional pattern of command type verbs. Whereas with statements, as stated in the bracket, so your statements are subject controlling. So the subject of the infinitive is controlled by the subject of the main verb. With the commands, however, it's object controlling. And also, there's just some contrast between the peninsular European Spanish in Spain versus the Latin American Spanish. It's been pointed out by Montalbetti in a very interesting chapter in 1999. Is in Peru and Ecuador, and also in Chile, because I've said this with speakers of Latin American Spanish. Yeah, Peru, Ecuador, and Chile permits de plus infinitive only in the passive. So, for example, so these examples, yeah. María fue impedida de ir al cine. María fue permitida, or María fue prohibida, etc. De, and then plus infinitive, etc. Okay, so Maria was prevented, permitted, or prohibited to do something. In the active counterparts, de is not used. In fact, they say that de is ungrammatical. So you will use the simple infinitive. So for example, Juan le impidió ir al cine a María. Juan le permitió. Juan le prohibió a María, and then comer or leer, etc. So in Latin American Spanish, we seem to only get de only in the passive, which is quite interesting actually. All right, so we've identified the phenomena that we want to look at, namely el deísmo, de plus infinitive, which is interesting because it is substandard in Spanish. We don't get these type of de infinitives in standard Spanish. We also in Spanish dialectal a variation between the peninsular Spanish and Latin American Spanish, where there's the active and the passive contrast. So this is the empirical problem that I want to look at with you. The next step, of course, is to find an explanation. And well, given that I'm a formal linguist, I look at a formal grammar. And oops, who else to look for? But from Chomsky, the greatest formal linguist alive, or perhaps ever. Our favorite activists, etc. But Chomsky in 2001, he proposed something very influential, something called phases. Phases introduce this idea that arguments are introduced by functional categories. In the case of subjects, subjects are introduced by a category called C, which is higher than T. This is always quite technical, but so just let me present this in a schematic form. So if you look at deísmo, again, deísmo means there present infinitive. We've got the strange particle here, preceding the infinitive. Now, if we look at these constructions of command again, the idea is that these are the object are controlling. So the object of the verb controls the subject of the infinitive. There and similar particles like it, like the English atufinitive, have been analyzed as C elements. People like people call it a low C element. So well, some people call it a mood marker, but it is generally speaking a C element. And as there is a C element, it selects an infinitive, which is technically speaking, a non-finite clause, which is a TP. And in this type of infinitival structure, we could say that the subject of the infinitive is introduced by there. There being a C element introduces an argument to the infinitive, whereas when there is absent, when we have just simply a bare infinitive, we don't have this phase. All right, so I think we can correlate the subject of the infinitive with the presence of there. We can say that the subject of the infinitive is introduced by there. Building on this premise.
You're over time, Keith.
Okay, yeah, passivization. But just quickly, I'll go through the chance, but I can see passivization is argued to be object raising as object. So the subject gets deleted, object gets raised to the subject position. Yeah. Sheehan and Serino argues that different types of verb have different sizes. So if there's no external argument projected in the infinitive, there cannot be a passivization. All right, so for example, the prepositional the examples, they show that in passivization, different verbs have different properties because different verbs select different sizes of the infinitive. So the passivization is only possible if the infinitive contains a projection that projects the external argument that can move to the subject of the main verb as per passivization. All right, so if I just explain this, we've seen that in European Spanish, we have it, we have your verbs decir and pedir in the active, whereas in Latin American Spanish we have these verbs in the passive only with there. All right, so we can argue that there introduces the external argument you're controlled by the object, whereas in Latin American Spanish, there licenses the external argument to move to the subject position of the main verb in passivization. So again, so we can parameterize el and deísmo in these different varieties of Spanish. All right, so to wrap up. So in this particular presentation, I've provided dialectal data in Spanish. The problem is there el deísmo, and we've seen that there are some micro differences between European Spanish and Latin American Spanish. In European Spanish, we get the active forms, active verbs plus there. In Latin American, we get passive forms plus there. And adopting a very popular and mainstream formal analysis proposed by Chomsky. Okay, we can say that there introduces the subject of the infinitive according to his phase theory, and peninsular we get there licenses the object controlled subject, whereas in Latin American Spanish there licenses the subject when it's raised, only when it's raised in passivization. Thank you very much. Please get in touch and keep in touch.
Thank you, Keith. If you could just turn your recording off. Thank you very much for that presentation. We are a little bit over time, but we do, I'll give you one question. Stephanie?